I'm Jack, 28, a software engineer in Austin, Texas. Tonight I drank more than usual at the bar near work. I was driving home, my mind hazy from the alcohol. That was a serious mistake. My car swayed on the highway. I tried to focus on the middle lane, my stinging eyes trying to stay wide open. Suddenly, a red car zoomed out from the right lane. No turn signal, no warning. I slammed on the brakes, feeling the tires slide on the pavement. A few seconds later, the car spun sideways, its rear tires scraping against the concrete median with a piercing screech of metal. The loud noise made me a bit more alert. My heart pounded as I realized what was happening. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands trembling, clutching the steering wheel. Cold sweat ran down my back. I needed to sober up before continuing. Looking around, I saw the neon sign of a Wendys about 200 yards away. I quickly steered my car to the restaurant. The large parking lot was almost empty, with only an old brown car parked far off in the left corner. Its headlights were still on, but there was no one in the car. I parked near the entrance. The automatic glass doors of the restaurant opened with a soft hiss. The bright white lights inside the restaurant made me squint. The cold air from the air conditioning hit my face, making me a bit more awake. Behind the counter, a young girl stood. Her uniform shirt had dark brown dried stains on the shoulder and chest. Maybe ketchup. "Hi, what can I get for you?" Her voice sounded hoarse, like someone who had just been crying or yelling a lot. "I'll have a beef burger and a medium soda. Anything else?" "We also have fresh hot cheese." I shook my head. She nodded, then turned her back towards the kitchen. I looked around the restaurant while waiting for my food. Besides me, there were 3 other customers sitting at separate tables. An old man in his 60s, wearing a black leather jacket, sat in the left corner. At a table near the window, a woman in a blue nurse's uniform sat looking out. In the middle of the restaurant, a young man in a team sports t-shirt sat in front of a tray of tacos. He kept scratching his left arm, leaving red marks. He scratched so hard, I saw blood seeping through his shirt. Something wasn't right with these people. All of them had grayish-blue skin, just like the employee. "Can you wait about 5 minutes? The meat's still grilling." The employee's voice, which I had just been thinking about, startled me. I nodded. "I'm going to the restroom for a bit. It's at the end of the hallway to your left." I thanked her and followed her directions. Pushing the door open, the stench immediately made me cover my nose. The toilet was overflowing with a thick, reddish-brown liquid. Toilet paper was scattered all over the floor, soggy and strangely colored. The mirror above the sink was cracked into many pieces, reflecting a distorted image of me. The faucet ran something rust-colored, with a strong metallic smell. I held my breath, quickly exiting, unable to bear it any longer. Reaching the hallway, I stopped, gasping for air. When I returned to the dining area, I froze midway. Something had changed. The restaurant was now full of people. Every table had customers, easily 20 to 30 people. Where did they all come from? I'd only been gone for 3 minutes, but the more I looked, the more frightened I became. These people weren't normal. Their skin was grayish-blue, like spoiled meat. Some had open wounds bleeding. The man at table 3 was missing an eye. The woman sitting near me had a broken arm, bones sticking out. They were all eating intently. The sounds of chewing and swallowing echoed through the restaurant. "Sir Jack, your food's ready." I jumped. The employee had just called me by name, but I'd never told her my name. I walked to the counter on shaky legs. She handed me a red plastic tray. The burger was split open, the bun black, oozing a dark red liquid that smelled putrid. The soda cup held a thick black liquid with dead flies floating on top. "Thanks for visiting our store," she grinned, revealing blackened teeth. "You'll love working here." Working? I dropped the tray to the floor, food splattering everywhere. Immediately, I ran towards the exit, but it wouldn't open. I pushed hard, twisted the handle, kicked the glass door. but the door was like it was welded shut. "Jack, you can't go anywhere." I turned around. All the customers were standing up, looking at me. The old man from the corner table approached, and I clearly saw a large bullet hole in his forehead, brain matter smeared on his face. The nursewoman turned towards me, a rope tightly wrapped around her neck, the skin around the knot dark purple. "Welcome to the night shift," the young man in the team shirt said. He raised his hand. His left arm was just white bone from the elbow down. "You'll be serving customers just like us." I fell into extreme panic, turning back and continuously pounding on the door, screaming loudly, "No! I don't belong here! Let me go!" I ran to the window looking out at the parking lot. My car wasn't in its spot anymore. Instead, a car lay overturned. The front was crumpled as if it had just been in a crash, the windshield shattered, and through the broken driver's side window, I saw a dead body wearing a blue shirt and jeans, exactly like what I was wearing. Not just similar, it was me. I was dead. I hadn't been able to avoid the accident with the pickup truck. Now you get it, right? The employee moved closer, her feet not touching the ground. "We're all dead. Mr. Pete was shot in a store robbery. Linda ended it herself because of stress. Tommy died in a motorcycle accident. And now you join us." "I don't want to," I screamed, tears streaming down my face. "No one wants to. But this is where people who die in late-night accidents have to work. Forever." She handed me a red apron stained with red streaks. "Your shift starts now. Customers are waiting." I looked around. More people had appeared. All dead bodies. They looked at me with empty eyes. They were waiting for me to serve them. I screamed, thrashing, unable to accept the truth. Suddenly, I felt a massive headache. I clutched my head and collapsed. After opening my eyes, I found myself lying on the pavement next to my car, which was still intact. A police officer was leaning over me, shining a flashlight in my face. "Are you okay? We've seen you lying here for 15 minutes. Someone driving by called the police." I slowly sat up, my head throbbing. Looking around, I saw I was in the Wendys parking lot. But the restaurant was completely dark. The sign read, "Closed." "Have you been drinking?" the officer asked, his gaze serious. I think I fell when I got out of the car. Maybe I passed out. Do you need an ambulance?" "No, I'm fine. Just a little dizzy. I'll have to take your license, and you'll get a summons for driving under the influence." I ran my hand through my hair, feeling ashamed and confused. The police called a taxi for me. While waiting, I couldn't stop looking towards the restaurant. Through the dark windows, I swore I saw a faint figure standing behind the counter. A blonde girl in a red uniform, as if waiting for the next shift. But when I looked closer, it was just the reflection of the streetlights on the glass. Maybe so.
There are experiences that you think only happen in horror movies, but I lived through a night that I will never forget, and that's why I want to share it with you. A midnight road trip across state lines, just me in the darkness, and then the horror began. It was around 3 a.m. The highway stretched out before me, completely deserted, with not a soul in sight. The sky was pitch black, with only the faint light from the street lamps shining down. The feeling of loneliness was palpable, as if the whole world had fallen asleep, and I was the only one left battling the silence. As the clock inched closer to 4 a.m., I began to feel hungry. My stomach reminded me that it was time to refuel. The red lights of a Wendys sign appeared in my sight, and I felt a sense of relief at seeing a bit of light in the thick darkness of the night. I decided to turn in there to find something to fill my growling, hungry stomach. Wendys at 4 in the morning has a different atmosphere, unlike any time I've been there before. The red neon light emitted from the sign flickered weakly, casting strange shadows on the ground. The surrounding space was eerily silent, with only the sound of the wind whistling through the cracks in the door. I got out of the car, and a chilling feeling began to crawl down my spine. The glass door of Wendy's reflected my shadow as I walked closer. I opened the door, and the chime announcing a customer echoed, a piercing sound in the quiet space, startling me. But the strangest thing was, there was no one there. No staff were at the counter, and the ceiling fan creaked on the ceiling like the soundtrack of a horror scene. The light from the fluorescent bulbs on the ceiling flickered, creating patches of light and shadow, as if trying to tell me that something was wrong here. The air in the restaurant was cold and desolate, the musty smell mixed with the scent of grease, making me feel uncomfortable. I decided to leave, trying a little longer to find another restaurant. But just as I was leaving the parking lot, not far ahead, a man appeared right in front of my car. He motioned for me to stop, his face looking worried. At first, I intended to ignore him, but after a moment of hesitation, I decided to stop the car. The man continued gesturing for me to roll down the window. I complied, but only a little, enough to hear what he had to say. The man begged me for help. He needed to charge his battery because his car wouldn't start. I thought about refusing, especially in such a scary setting at that moment. But then, I believed in the law of karma, and if I were in his position, it would be truly desperate not to receive help. There could be many different reasons why someone might be alone in the dark of the night. Isn't it true that I'm also driving across states at 4 a.m? He was overjoyed when I agreed to help, constantly thanking me and pointing toward his car. Why was it parked at the edge of the forest instead of in a more spacious area? I had those doubts, but I still followed through with my decision, maneuvering my car so that the front of my car was close to the front of his. I turned on the flashlight on my phone and connected the batteries of the 2 cars together. Suddenly, 2 other cars rushed toward me, their headlights blindingly shining directly into my face. The 2 cars blocked the rear of my car, and from the darkness, 2 other men stepped out. The headlights illuminated their faces, cold, piercing eyes, expressionless faces, and gazes that seemed to be directed straight at me. All my instincts immediately went on alert. I briefly saw a flash of light reflecting off one of the men's hands. It was a long knife with a gleaming blade. The other man was equally frightening. He was holding a gun, his face cold as if he had already prepared for something terrible. The feeling of doubt had now turned into sheer terror. I knew I was in real danger. Tangled thoughts spun in my mind. Why are they here? What do they want from me? There was no time to think further. Survival instincts took over, and I knew I had to leave immediately. Leaving everything behind, I turned and fled into the forest, the darkness enveloping me like a thick, suffocating blanket. I ran relentlessly, pushing past bushes and sharp, dry branches, each cut serving as a reminder that I had to get as far away from this place as possible. The entire night, I hid in a bush, not daring to move. I stayed silent, listening to the wind whistling through the branches and the sound of insects, unable to stop myself from imagining the terrible things lurking in the darkness. A few times, I heard footsteps somewhere very close, and immediately my heart felt like it was about to jump out of my chest. I tried to control my breathing, each breath feeling like a betrayal in my effort to hide. Time seemed to stretch on endlessly. Each passing second felt like an agony. But finally, the light of dawn began to filter through the canopy of leaves. I let out a sigh of relief, feeling as if I had just been freed from a nightmare. My body was numb from sitting curled up all night, but I knew I was safer now. I carefully stepped out of the bush, groping my way back to the narrow trail that led out of the forest. I needed to call the police, but my hands were still trembling and my heart wouldn't stop pounding. My car was gone, along with the 2 cars of those lying criminals. The car of the man who asked for my help was actually severely damaged, just a junk pile in disguise. I looked at the empty road, my heart filled with frustration and a sense of helplessness. The thieves had vanished, and no one knew who they were or where they had come from. To this day, my car and the identities of the 3 criminals have still not been found. I stopped by a Wendy's one late evening after a long, exhausting day of work. The bright red neon lights from the sign reflected on the wet road, creating a scene that was both familiar and vaguely unsettling. I had returned there many times, not necessarily for the food, but for something else. The cashier, the young girl with bright red hair, freckles dotting her cheeks, and bright eyes. She looked exactly like Wendy from the logo of the restaurant, to the point that it was hard to believe. I began forming the habit of coming at the same time each week just to see her. One time, I noticed that the dark circles under her eyes had become darker. There was something in her eyes that made me feel uneasy, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. She seemed tired, her movements slower. When I paid, her hand trembled slightly. I almost asked if she was okay, but then I held back. We weren't friends, just a customer and a cashier. Then one day she disappeared. No one mentioned her, and no one took her place at the cash register. I asked another employee, but he just shrugged, showing no sign of concern. Their indifference made me uncomfortable. She had worked there for so long, and no one cared when she disappeared. I kept coming to the store regularly, out of habit, and hoping to see that girl again. Then I saw her, but not behind the counter, on the store sign. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but when I looked closely, the face on the sign had changed. The classic Wendy smile now seemed off, her mouth stretched wider, her eyes hollow, and her skin was no longer smooth, showing cracks as if it was about to split. Her red hair was no longer cheerfully braided but was wild, untidy. I tried not to think about it, but every time I came back, the sign kept warping more. Her eyes sunk deeper, the smile became more distorted, and her lips seemed to be trying to say something. No one else seemed to notice. Or was I imagining it? One time when my car stopped at a red light right in front of the store, the Wendy's sign suddenly blinked off for a second. When it lit up again, I saw her eyes seem to have shifted, staring directly at me. I was so startled, I nearly crashed into the car in front of me. One night, I found an old article online. A female employee from this Wendy's had been murdered years ago. The owner had become furious when she was late for work, and he attacked her like a madman. Her body was hidden in the freezer and wasn't discovered until weeks later, when the stench of decay started to spread. The store owner had disappeared, and no one knew where he was. The store continued to operate as if nothing had ever happened. I felt a chill run down my spine. I didn't return to that store for months, trying to erase all memories of the cashier who looked like Wendy. But the obsession didn't go away. I began having nightmares. In the dreams, I found myself standing in the cold kitchen of the store, the sound of water dripping from the freezer. A pale hand suddenly reached out, touching my leg. When I turned around, Wendy was standing there, her lips moving, but no sound coming out. She was trying to say something. One night, when I drove by, I couldn't help but glance at the sign. Wendy was looking at me. Her eyes were empty, but I could clearly sense the awareness in them. Her mouth stretched wider than ever before, as if trying to say something. I could almost imagine her last words before she was killed, perhaps pleading, perhaps in fear. A whisper echoed, "Help me." I sped up. I never went back there again, but every time I see a Wendy's sign anywhere, I can't help but glance at it. And in that moment, I always feel she's watching me.
That day, Claire and I swung by this Wendy's on Fifth Avenue, the kind that's always packed with people. It wasn't anything fancy, but their menu always had just enough good stuff to keep us coming back. We ordered a couple of sandwiches with fries. Everything was cool until Claire took one bite and just froze. She made a face, then pulled out this long, black strand of hair tangled up in the melted cheese. I flagged down a waiter right away. A skinny young guy came over, his red uniform looking a little wrinkled. He took one look at the hair on the plate, and his face went totally pale. I'm not the kind of customer who makes a big deal out of things, but come on, this was just nasty. It was a simple complaint, but the guy reacted like I'd just ruined his whole life. The restaurant manager showed up fast, a middle-aged guy with a big belly and a round, friendly face. He apologized over and over, offered to remake the food, and even comped the whole meal. We didn't have to pay, and Claire didn't want to make a scene. Seemed like everything got handled just fine. But I couldn't shake the look on the waiter's face when he got called to the back. He glanced at the manager, eyes wide, like he was about to cry. It wasn't the kind of fear you get when you're about to be chewed out for messing up. It was pure hopelessness. Claire caught it too. When the kitchen door shut behind them, she shivered a little. We walked out of that place feeling kind of weird, but we didn't think too much about it at the time. Over the next few weeks, we kept going back to the diner. Weird thing was, that same waiter was never there. Every time there was someone new. One time a tiny blonde girl. Another time a big, grumpy-looking dude. Different faces, but one thing stayed the same. None of them lasted more than a week. At first, it was just a weird little mystery. Then Claire picked up on something even stranger. The food tasted off. The sandwiches had lost that rich, familiar flavor. The grilled meats didn't have that same smoky smell. The fries? Weirdly bland. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something felt off. They probably changed the chef, I said when Claire brought it up. But whoever was back there, the food wasn't just different, it was all over the place. Some days the sandwiches were way too salty. Other days they barely had any flavor at all. Sometimes they were perfect. Other times they tasted so bad it was like someone who had never cooked in their life had thrown them together. Like nobody in the kitchen actually knew what they were doing. Then one day, Claire hit me with a question that made me stop cold. Do you think something was wrong with that waiter last time? I blinked. And just like that, his face popped back into my head, those scared, almost panicked eyes, his whole body tensing up as he walked into the kitchen. I had never seen him again. Hell, I'd never seen any of the employees more than twice. A weird, uneasy feeling crawled up my chest. I glanced down at the sandwich in my hands. Melted cheese, a few slices of cold meat, some fresh lettuce. Looked normal, but suddenly I didn't feel like eating it anymore. The next time I went back, I made sure to really pay attention. The staff had changed again this time. It was a young woman with brown hair, a pale face, and eyes that stayed glued to the floor. When we ordered, I caught it right away. Her hands were shaking, just barely, but enough to notice. She was scared. The manager, the same friendly-looking guy with the pot belly from before, was standing by the kitchen door, arms crossed, watching. Not like a boss checking in on his staff, more like a guard keeping an eye on prisoners. And just like that, I thought of that first waiter, his empty stare, his shaky breathing when he got called inside, and how we never saw him again. Claire and I had already decided we wouldn't come back, but honestly, we should have made that call sooner. We tried looking up info on the place. No reports about missing employees. No one talking about anything weird going on in that kitchen. But there was something even creepier. None of the employees had ever left a single review or comment about the place. No one had ever said they worked there. Not once. Claire turned to me, panic all over her face. Do you think they are? She couldn't even finish, but I knew exactly where her mind was going, and if I was right, then that meant we had eaten. I couldn't let myself go there. Still, we went back. Curiosity, fear, something in between. The place wasn't too crowded. Claire went in first, wanting to talk to whoever the newest employee was. I followed a minute later, scanning the room for her. She was standing near the kitchen counter, eyes wide, frozen in place. I stepped closer and finally understood why Claire looked like that. My stomach turned and I had to force myself not to gag. An arm, pale, skin still freshly cut, thin fingers hanging limp, but that wasn't even the worst part. Right next to me, on a big cutting board, was a meat cleaver. The blade was clean, but not completely clean. A dark brown stain clung to the steel. A small piece of skin, definitely not pork or beef, was still stuck to the edge of the blade. I stumbled back, crashing into a chair, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. Claire grabbed my hand and yanked me hard. We ran. No clue how far, just that by the time we made it back to the car, I was still shaking. And then, it all clicked. The food tasting different every time. The disappearing employees. They didn't quit. They weren't fired. They were ingredients. Claire broke down in tears. We tried calling the cops, but by the time they got there, everything was gone, spotless, like nothing had ever happened. The cops looked at us like we were crazy. They checked the kitchen, searched the whole restaurant, then came back with a simple answer. Nothing suspicious. "You sure you weren't just seeing things?" one of them asked. I opened my mouth to argue, but then I saw him, the manager, standing right in front of the kitchen door, staring straight at me. The cops looked at us like we were crazy, like he was saying, "No one's gonna believe you." The restaurant stayed open. Customers kept coming, kept eating like nothing was wrong, but I never went back, because I knew one thing for sure. Soon there'd be a new employee.